So my sharing today is based upon the reading that Aline brought us from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 3, verses 17 through to chapter 4 and verse 1. Now, I wonder who can tell me, what do Batman, now you need to listen, what do Batman, George Clooney, Bono, the lead singer of U2, Ed Sheeran, and Cristiano Ronaldo all have in common? Any ideas?
Not a clue.
What do they all know? Not a clue. I can see heads shaking. Well, I'll put you out of your misery, but they actually all feature on a list of what we might term modern day icons or modern day role models. Some may even go as far as calling them heroes.
Really?
But that made me think, as I was preparing, what would we see as some of the qualities of a true hero? Well, I had a look and I found this. It's quite long, but we'll go through it. So, giving us a good idea of a hero. And we find that a hero is someone who goes above and beyond what would normally be expected. And typically they would do this in order to save others. Heroes are often protectors of the weak. A hero displays courage, takes action regardless of any fear. They're decisive. They act without sort of second thought or hesitation. Heroes are helpful to all who are in need. They have a strong dedication to selfless service, and they're always willing to place their own lives in harm's way rather than to allow others to face danger. A hero. Now, as we consider that sort of list, then we might now start to find ourselves struggling to put some of those people I just mentioned onto that or into that category of hero, apart from Batman, of course. And yet, have you noticed how in society today, we readily, almost too quickly, dare I say, put people into the category of hero or icon? And maybe that's a sort of a symptom of our culture and our society. We're constantly looking for heroes. We long for someone to admire, someone to look up to follow, to copy. And we see this hugely once we start looking at sort of social media influencers. And if we were thinking of heroes today, then on the very serious end, we might put, the people who are helping people in the Ukraine, who are putting their lives at risk to bring refugees out, or who are taking aid in. Somewhere in the middle of that list, working from the real sort of hero downwards, somewhere in the middle, well, it depends, you might put it towards the end, there's someone like Huda Katana. Now, if you Google the name, you will find that she is a young lady who does sort of online beauty therapy and beauty tips. She has just over 48 million Instagram followers. Think of the power and the influence that she has. And then coming to the extreme ridiculous end, we might place someone like Peppa Pig. Now, if you've not heard of Peppa Pig, talk to your grandchildren. But Peppa Pig has a huge following and has a huge influence upon thousands of children. And whether they're true or imaginary, whether they're real or ridiculous, these modern day heroes or icons have a huge influence upon shaping who we are. our character, and our personality. Now, having thought about that, here's another question. I wonder, who is your role model, your modern day hero? Who is it that you look up to, admire, perhaps want to copy or emulate? Who is your modern day hero and why? And then as we think about this within the context of the Christian church, so often we can find that we're no different. We're longing for good role models or heroes, and not simply characters from the pages of the Bible, but real people, those around us today, people who we can respect, whose comments and advice we value, those who champion the place of the church. And sadly, if we're honest, we might say, well, maybe they're few and far between in these times. But I wonder, who might be your Christian role model or your Christian hero? Now, as we consider Paul's letter to this sort of fledgling church in Philippi, you might have missed it as Aline read it to us, but it was the first line of the reading we had today. And Paul says, "Be imitators of me as I imitate Christ." Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. But what is the example that Paul sets? How closely does Paul sort of match up to that description of our modern day hero that I gave earlier on? Now, I'm going to be a little bit naughty here because I'm just going to let you find that out for yourself. If you've got time, Philippians is a short book. Have a look through it and just see in there the example that Paul sets, that he encourages them to follow, and how that measures up to that sort of example or definition of hero that we saw earlier on. I'm going to be naughty, like I say, and let you do that, because what I want to do is ask you another question. And I think it's a really good question to ask during Lent. And certainly as I was preparing for this morning, it's challenged me. And the question is this: how might we feel if we knew that we were someone's hero? How might you feel? How might I feel if we knew that you were someone's hero? How might it change the way we live, knowing that someone looked upon us as a role model or as an example to follow? Putting this question another way, how confident would we be to say to others, as Paul said, "Follow my example as I follow Christ"? Is my life as a Christian a positive example for others to follow? Because the reality is, whether we like it or not, we are all examples that others will look to one way or another. If our friends and neighbors know that we go to church, then they'll have their understanding or their idea of what a Christian should be like, and they'll lay that over our lives, and they'll look at us. The question we all face, including myself, is, as a Christian, how good or not an example am I? Now, as I got to this point in my preparation, I suddenly thought, it's easy to make the excuse, oh, don't look at me, don't follow me. I'm not a very good Christian. There are better Christians in our church to follow. And we see what we do. We say, don't look at me, look at someone else. And we divert people's gaze. But they are looking at us. As Christians, we're not called to say, look at their life, but don't look at mine, however tempting that might be. Rather, we are all called to live our lives in such a way that we are worthy of the name Christian. Paul himself says, live your lives in such a manner that you are worthy of the gospel of Christ. And we're to do that, not just when people are looking at us, when we know we're being sort of looked at, as it were, but we're to do that all the time. I wonder, as you and I, ponder some of those qualities of the modern day hero, and as we think about the example of Christ, who was selfless, who lived a life of love, who was willing to walk the way of the cross, who had a genuine concern for others, putting the needs of others before his own, we could go on. I wonder, how many of these qualities are present in my life? How many of those qualities are present in your life? Follow my example, says Paul, as I follow the example of Christ. And so again, as we reflect on these readings that we're getting through our Lenten journey, we see again that our so oft first reaction to Lent about giving something up or taking something on is not really quite what Lent is all about. Rather, Lent is a time to remind ourselves that we are loved and valued. We saw that last week. And alongside this, Lent is a time for us to examine not only our own heroes, the people we follow, recognizing that, as Paul reminds us, ultimately we should be following Christ. But Lent is also a time to bring ourselves a challenge. Is my life, am I a good example for others to follow in what I say and in what I do? How confident would we be or not to say, follow my example as I follow Christ? Now, that's something worth considering through Lent.